The discovery the observation deck of Research Station Praxis 9 hummed with its usual quiet efficiency. Vela stood at her monitoring station, her slender fingers dancing across the holographic interface as she tracked the movement of stellar dust clouds in the outer rim. At 23 cycles old, she was the youngest astrophysicist ever assigned to such a remote posting. Her silver-blue skin shimmered under the station's soft lighting, and her large violet eyes reflected the star charts. Before her dot, it was supposed to be another ordinary shift. The Zentari people had operated this station for 40 years, studying the mysteries of deep space far from their homeworld. They were a peaceful race, devoted to knowledge and understanding. Conflict was something they read about in historical archives, not something they experienced. That peaceful existence ended at 0847 station time. Vela, are you seeing this? Her colleague Torvin's voice cracked with uncertainty. He was older, more experienced, but the tremor in his words made him sound like a frightened child. Vela's attention snapped to her display. A new contact had appeared on the long-range sensors. It was small, moving erratically, tumbling through space like a leaf caught in a storm. I see it. Running analysis now. Her fingers flew across the controls. The computer processed the data, and information began streaming across her screen. The object was metallic, roughly 12 meters in length. Heat signatures indicated a failing power source. Most concerning was the life sign detector. It was reading positive. There's someone inside, Vela whispered. Within minutes, Station Commander Kelrus arrived in the observation room. He was a tall Xanthari, with deep blue skin marked by the silver lines of age and wisdom. His expression was grave as he studied the readings. How long before it drifts past us? At current trajectory, it will pass within 50,000 kilometers in 3 hours, Vela reported. But Commander, the life signs are fading. Whoever is inside won't survive much longer. Kelrus was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Prepare retrieval team. We cannot let someone die when we have the power to save them. The retrieval operation took 90 minutes. Vela watched from the observation deck as the station's small recovery craft approached the tumbling object. As it drew closer, the vessel's exterior cameras provided clearer images. The craft was unlike anything in the Xanthari database. Its design was angular and aggressive, built for function rather than elegance. Scorch marks and impact damage covered its hull. Strange symbols were painted on its side. The computer attempted translation, but found no match in any known language. This vessel came from a species the Xanthari had never encountered. Bringing it into Bay 4, the retrieval team leader reported. Atmospheric seals are holding. We have a stable environment. Vela couldn't stay at her station any longer. She needed to see this for herself. She rushed through the corridors of Praxis 9, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. By the time she reached Bay 4, a crowd had gathered. Medical personnel stood ready with their equipment. Security officers were present, though the Xanthari had no real weapons. Only stun devices meant for dealing with dangerous wildlife specimens. The craft sat in the center of the bay, still and silent. Smoke rose from its damaged engines. One of the engineers approached cautiously, scanning for an entry point. He found a panel and pressed it. Nothing happened. He tried again, this time using a manual override tool. With a hiss of escaping air, a section of the hull slid open. White vapor poured out, cold and dense. Everyone stepped back. The vapor cleared slowly, revealing the interior. And there, strapped into a crash seat, was the pilot. Vela felt her breath catch. The being was humanoid in basic structure, with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. But the similarities ended there. Its skin was a pale peachy color, covered partially by a torn flight suit of dark material. Hair, black as the void of space, covered its head. The face was angular with strong features, so different from the smooth, rounded faces of her people. Biosigns are weak but stable, the medical chief announced, running a scanner over the unconscious pilot. Oxygen breather, carbon-based life form. The physiology is unlike anything I've seen, but I believe we can help. They moved the pilot to the medical bay with extreme care. Vela followed, unable to tear herself away. She watched as the medical team worked, connecting monitoring devices, administering basic care. Hours passed. The pilot remained unconscious, but its condition stabilized. Vela returned to her quarters briefly to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. She kept thinking about the mysterious pilot, about where it had come from and what had happened to it. When she returned to the medical bay 6 hours later, she found Commander Kelris standing outside the recovery room, staring through the transparent wall at their patient. "We may have made a mistake," Kelris said quietly. "What do you mean?" "I had the computer run deeper analysis on that craft. The weapon signatures, the engine design, the materials used. Everything points to one conclusion. This is a military vessel, Veli. We have rescued a soldier." A chill ran down Vela's spine. "A soldier from where? Fighting whom?" "I don't know. But those burn marks on the hull, the damage to the systems, that pilot was in combat before ending up here. We may have just involved ourselves in someone else's war." Before Vela could respond, alarms sounded in the medical bay. The monitors connected to the pilot showed spiking vital signs. The being was waking up. Medical staff rushed in. Vela and Kelris entered the room as well, keeping a respectful distance. The pilot's eyes opened slowly. They were brown, a deep rich brown that seemed to hold both warmth and sadness. Those eyes moved, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings, the strange faces looking down at it. The pilot tried to sit up. Pain flashed across its features, and it fell back with a grunt. One of the medical staff gently pressed it back down, speaking in soft, soothing tones, though they knew the pilot couldn't understand. Commander Kelris stepped forward, activating his universal translator device. The technology was old but reliable, capable of building language patterns from vocal samples. "Please remain calm. You are safe. We found you drifting in space and brought you here. Can you understand me?" The pilot stared at him for a long moment. Then it spoke. The voice was rough, deeper than any Xanthari voice. The translator worked rapidly, processing the sounds. After several seconds, words appeared on the device's display. Where am I?" "You are aboard Research Station Praxis 9, Kelris explained. "We are the Xanthari. We mean you no harm. What is your name? Where do you come from?" The pilot closed its eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. When it spoke again, the translator had improved its accuracy. "James. My name is James Sullivan. I'm from Earth. I'm a pilot in the Terran Coalition Navy." Terran, Earth. The words meant nothing to Vela, but she committed them to memory. "What happened to you, James Sullivan?" Kelris asked gently. James's expression darkened. "We were on patrol near the Kelver Expanse. 3 Draxian hunter-killers ambushed us. My squadron, we didn't stand a chance. They were too fast, too many. I saw my wingmates die, one by one. My fighter took a hit that destroyed my main systems. I managed to eject, got into my emergency pod, and activated the cryosleep function. That's the last thing I remember." "The Draxians," Kelris repeated. "We are not familiar with this species." Consider yourselves lucky," James said bitterly. "They're a plague on the galaxy. They attack without warning, take no prisoners, show no mercy. For 5 years, we've been fighting them. Humanity has lost entire colonies to their raids." Vela found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "Why do they attack you?" James's brown eyes found hers. She felt the intensity of his gaze, the weight of experience far beyond his apparent years. Because they can. Because we have resources they want. Because in their culture, strength is the only virtue that matters. They see us as weak, as prey. But you fight back, Vela said. A ghost of a smile crossed James's face. Yes, we fight back. Humans don't give up easily. It's not in our nature. Over the following days, James recovered his strength. The Xanthari medical team marveled at his resilience. Injuries that would have taken a Xanthari weeks to heal seemed to close in days on the human. His body was denser, stronger, built for a world with higher gravity than their own. Vela spent hours with James, learning about his people. Earth, he explained, was a world of extremes. Vast oceans covered most of its surface. Mountain ranges reached heights that would dwarf anything on Xanthara. The climate varied from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. Life on Earth was a constant struggle against the environment. We evolved as hunters, James told her one afternoon as they sat in the station's observation lounge. Through the windows, stars stretched in every direction. Pursuit predators. We would chase our prey for hours, sometimes days, until it collapsed from exhaustion. That persistence, that refusal to quit, it's coded into our DNA. Your world sounds terrifying, Vela admitted. James laughed, a sound that was somehow both harsh and warm. Maybe it is, but it's home, and it made us what we are. When the Draxians came to our space, when they destroyed our colonies and killed our people, they expected us to surrender. They didn't understand that humans don't break easily. On the 5th day, James asked to see the station's communication center. Commander Kelrus hesitated, but eventually agreed. James examined their systems with professional interest. This is impressive technology. Different from ours, but sophisticated. Can your people find you? Kelrus asked. James's expression became troubled. I don't know. My emergency beacon was damaged. But before I went into cryosleep, I managed to rig a secondary signal. If it worked, if it transmitted before the power died, then yes. They'll come looking for me. And if they do? Vela asked quietly. What then? James met her eyes. Then you'll meet humanity, for better or worse. My people have a saying. We don't leave our own behind. Ever. If there's even a chance I'm alive, they'll search every star system between here and Earth to find me. That night, Vela couldn't sleep. She went to the observation deck and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a war was raging. Humans and Draxians locked in brutal combat. And here, on this peaceful research station, they had saved a human soldier. What would that mean for them? Her thoughts were interrupted by alarms. Red lights flashed throughout the station. Vela ran to the nearest communication panel. What's happening? Torvin's voice came through, tight with panic. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple contacts entering the system. Large vessels, military configuration. Vela, you need to get to the command center now. Vela's heart pounded as she raced through the corridors. She burst into the command center to find chaos. Every screen showed the same thing. Ships emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Big ships. Warships. Commander Kelrus stood at the central display, his face pale. How many? 15 contacts confirmed, the sensor officer reported. 18, 20. Commander, they're still coming. It's an entire fleet. James Sullivan appeared in the doorway, moving faster than any Xanthari, despite his recent injuries. He looked at the display, and Vela saw recognition flash across his face. Then something else. Relief mixed with concern. Those are human ships, James said quietly. The lead vessel is a Valiant-class dreadnought. That's the TCS Unbroken Dawn, flagship of the Fourth Fleet. He turned to Kelrus. Commander, I need to use your communications array. Right now. Why? Kelrus asked, though his hands were already moving to grant access. James's expression was grim. Because if I don't identify myself in the next 2 minutes, that fleet is going to assume I'm dead, and you're responsible. And you really don't want humanity to think you killed one of our own. Vela felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Outside the station, 20 human warships hung in space like sleeping predators. Inside, James Sullivan stood at the communication console, preparing to call his people home. And Vela realized with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The alien girl had frozen, mid-sentence when those ships appeared. Above their peaceful world, a human fleet had arrived. And the story of humanity's first contact with the Centauri was only just beginning. Asterisk the arrival. The communication console crackled to life as James Sullivan's fingers moved across the controls with practiced efficiency. Vela watched him work, noticing how his hands trembled slightly. Whether from lingering weakness or tension, she couldn't tell. The entire command center had gone silent. Every Centauri eye fixed on the human pilot and the displays showing the massive fleet that had materialized at the edge of their system. This is Lieutenant James Sullivan. Serial number 7-3-9-4-2-Delta. Calling TCS Unbroken Dawn, James spoke clearly into the communicator. Authentication code, Sierra Tango 97 Black Whiskey. I am alive and safe aboard Centauri Research Station Praxis 9. Repeat, I am alive and the Centauri are friendlies. They rescued me. Do not engage. Acknowledge. The seconds stretched into eternity. Static filled the speakers. Vela found herself holding her breath, her hearts beating so rapidly she thought they might burst. Commander Kelrus stood rigid beside her, his silver-lined face drawn tight with fear. Then a voice responded, deep and commanding, with an accent different from James's. Sullivan, this is Captain Maria Okonkwo of the Unbroken Dawn. Confirm biometric verification in progress. Stand by. A beam of light suddenly swept across the station from one of the distant ships. Vela's sensors registered it as a scanning pulse, far more sophisticated than anything the Centauri possessed. It passed through the station's hull as if the metal didn't exist, and she realized with a chill that the humans were verifying James's presence, making absolutely certain their pilot was alive. Biometrics confirmed, the captain's voice returned, noticeably warmer. Good to hear your voice, Lieutenant. We've been looking for you for 3 weeks. Thought we'd lost you to those Draxian bastards. James's shoulders sagged with relief. Almost did, Captain. These people saved my life. I was dead in the water when they found me. Understood. Stand by for fleet protocols. There was a pause. Then the captain's voice changed, becoming more formal. Centauri Research Station Praxis 9. This is Captain Maria Okonkwo, commanding officer of the Terran Coalition ship Unbroken Dawn and 4th Fleet Battle Group. We thank you for the rescue and care of our officer. We come in peace and mean you no harm. Request permission to approach your station for formal contact and retrieval operations. Commander Kelrus stepped forward, his voice remarkably steady despite his obvious fear. Captain Okonkwo, this is Commander Kelrus of the Centauri Science Directorate. Permission granted. We are honored to meet you, though we admit to being somewhat overwhelmed by the scale of your response. A sound came through the speakers that might have been a laugh. My apologies, Commander. When one of our own goes missing, we tend to bring everyone. The 4th Fleet has been sweeping this sector for weeks. Your rescue of Lieutenant Sullivan has prevented what would have been months of searching. For that, you have our deepest gratitude. Vela watched as the fleet began moving, their formation shifting with precise coordination. Most of the ships held position at a respectful distance, but one vessel broke away from the group. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the entire Xanthari station. Its hull was dark gray, angular and aggressive, covered in what could only be weapon systems. This was the Unbroken Dawn, and it moved through space with the confidence of an apex predator. "I've never seen anything like that," Torvin whispered beside Vela. "The power readings alone are beyond our comprehension. That single ship could generate more energy than our entire world." James overheard and nodded grimly. "The Dawn is a dreadnought. She carries a crew of 2,000, fields enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to glass, and can sustain combat operations for 6 months without resupply. She's also one of 20 ships here, and not even the most dangerous." "Not the most dangerous?" Kelris repeated faintly. "Those 6 smaller vessels flanking the main group," James pointed to the display. "Those are Reaper-class destroyers. Fast, deadly, and built specifically for ship-to-ship combat. In the war against the Draxians, a single Reaper has been known to take on 3 enemy capital ships and win." Vela felt her skin pale to almost white. The Xanthari had always considered themselves advanced, their technology sophisticated, and their understanding of the universe profound. But looking at that human fleet, she realized they were children playing with toys compared to what humanity had built. And they had built these things not for exploration or science, but for war. The Unbroken Dawn slowed as it approached the station, coming to rest 5 kilometers away. At this distance, its true scale became apparent. The dreadnought dwarfed Praxis 9 utterly. Vela could see smaller craft moving along its hull, maintenance drones and fighter craft secured in external racks. Each of those fighters was likely as powerful as the Xanthari's best defensive vessels. "Commander Kelris," Captain Okonkwo's voice returned, "I would like to send a shuttle to retrieve Lieutenant Sullivan and establish formal diplomatic contact. Will you receive our delegation?" "Of course, Captain," Kelris responded. "Bay 4 is ready for your arrival." 20 minutes later, Vela stood in Bay 4, alongside Commander Kelris and a dozen other station personnel. James Sullivan stood with them, having insisted on being present despite the medical staff's protests. He wore a clean flight suit the Xanthari had fabricated for him, though it didn't quite match the original design. The shuttle that entered the bay was sleek and efficient, its hull bearing the same insignia that marked James's damaged pod. It settled onto the deck with barely a whisper of thrust. The rear hatch opened, and 6 humans emerged. Vela's first impression was of their incredible diversity. Captain Okonkwo was a tall woman with dark skin and close-cropped hair, her uniform crisp and decorated with service medals. Beside her stood a shorter man with copper-colored skin and sharp features. The others varied in height, coloring, and build, but all shared the same intense presence that James carried. These were warriors, Vela realized. Every one of them moved with controlled power and heightened awareness. Captain Okonkwo's eyes found James immediately. "Lieutenant Sullivan, you look like hell." James snapped to attention, a gesture of respect Vela had learned was military protocol. "Captain, permission to report that I feel like hell, ma'am." The captain's stern expression cracked into a smile. "Permission granted. Stand easy, Lieutenant. You've earned it." She turned to Kelris and performed a slight bow, a gesture of respect that seemed to cost her nothing. "Commander Kelris, Captain Maria Okonkwo, Terran Coalition Navy. On behalf of humanity, I thank you for saving the life of one of our own." Kelris returned the bow, his movements graceful despite his nervousness. "We did only what any civilized people would do, Captain. We could not leave someone to die when we had the means to help." "That speaks well of your people," Okonkwo said. Not all species would make the same choice, especially for an unknown stranger. Her expression grew more serious. I hope our arrival hasn't caused too much alarm. We came in force because we didn't know what we would find. The area where we lost Lieutenant Sullivan is contested space. The Draxians control several systems nearby. At the mention of the Draxians, Kelris's skin flushed pale blue. We know very little of galactic politics, Captain. Our people are scientists and explorers, not soldiers. We had never heard of either humans or Draxians before finding Lieutenant Sullivan. Lucky you, a copper-skinned man beside Okonkwo muttered. The captain shot him a look, and he fell silent. Vela found herself speaking before she could stop herself. Captain, forgive my boldness, but I must ask. Lieutenant Sullivan told us about the war. He said the Draxians are ruthless, that they've attacked your colonies without mercy. How long has this conflict been happening? Okonkwo's expression darkened. 5 years of open warfare. But they'd been raiding our outer settlements for 2 years before that. At first, we tried diplomacy. We offered trade, cultural exchange, peaceful coexistence. They responded by destroying 3 of our colony worlds and killing everyone they could reach. After that, diplomacy was no longer an option. And you've been fighting ever since, Vela said quietly. Yes, and we'll keep fighting until either they're defeated or we are. Humanity doesn't surrender, and we don't abandon our people. Okonkwo's voice carried absolute conviction. Which brings me to an important point, Commander Kelris. You've inadvertently positioned yourselves in a dangerous region of space. The Draxions are expanding aggressively. This station is isolated and lightly defended. You're vulnerable. Kelris stiffened. We have no part in your war, Captain. We are neutral, dedicated only to science and knowledge. I understand that. But the Draxians don't care about neutrality. If they find you, they'll see resources to be taken and slaves to be acquired. They won't ask if you're involved in the conflict. They'll simply attack. Before Kelris could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Vela's datapad lit up with emergency notifications. She looked at the display and felt her blood turn to ice. Commander, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. New contacts emerging from FTL, multiple ships. They're matching the profiles Lieutenant Sullivan provided for Draxian vessels. The atmosphere in the bay changed instantly. Every human went rigid, their casual demeanor vanishing. Hands moved to weapons Vela hadn't even noticed they were carrying. Captain Okonkwo's expression became hard as steel. How many? She demanded. Vela checked her pad, her hands shaking. 8 capital ships. Dozens of smaller craft. Captain, they're heading straight for us. Okonkwo tapped a device on her wrist. Okonkwo to Dawn. Battle stations. Draxian fleet inbound. Estimated 8 capitals plus escorts. All ships to defensive formation around the station. Sullivan's rescue just became a combat operation. The human shuttle pilot was already back in his craft, engines spinning up. Okonkwo looked at Kelris. Commander, I need you to trust me. Get your people to the station's core, the most protected area you have. My ships will handle the Draxians, but there may be weapons fire near the station. I won't lie to you. This is going to get violent. Kelris looked lost, overwhelmed by the sudden shift from peaceful contact to impending battle. Vela stepped forward. Commander, we need to evacuate the outer sections now. Sound the emergency protocol. Kelris nodded numbly and activated the station-wide alert. Throughout Praxis 9, Centauri personnel began moving toward the reinforced core sections, their minds struggling to process what was happening. Vela turned to Captain Okonkwo. Will we survive this? The human captain's expression was fierce. Yes, because no one threatens people under humanity's protection. The Draxions are about to learn that lesson the hard way. The humans were already boarding their shuttle. James paused at the hatch, looking back at Vela. Get to safety. What's about to happen? It's not going to be pretty. Why are they here? Vela asked. Why now? James's expression was grim. They were probably tracking me. My emergency beacon, before it died, would have left a trail. They followed it, hoping to confirm the kill and maybe salvage my fighter's technology. His jaw clenched. Instead, they found the Fourth Fleet. Their mistake. The shuttle lifted off, racing back toward the unbroken dawn. Vela ran with the other Xanthari toward the core sections, but she couldn't help herself. She diverted to the observation deck, needing to see what would happen. The Draxian fleet was visible now, dark shapes against the stars. Their ships were organic-looking, all curves and spines, completely different from the angular human vessels. They outnumbered the human ships present, 8 capitals to the humans' 1 dreadnought. Though the human destroyers and other craft evened the odds somewhat, Vela expected negotiations, demands, some sort of communication. Instead, the Draxians opened fire immediately. Brilliant lances of energy streaked across the void toward the human fleet. Vela gasped, certain she was about to witness the destruction of the ships that had come to help them. But the human vessels moved. They didn't just evade. They flowed like a liquid, their formation shifting with impossible coordination. The Draxian weapons fire passed through empty space where human ships had been microseconds before. And then the humans returned fire. The difference was staggering. Draxian weapons were powerful but relatively straightforward. The humans employed a dizzying array of weaponry that Vela's scientific mind struggled to categorize. Kinetic rounds that moved at relativistic speeds. Energy weapons that seemed to tear at the fabric of space itself. Missiles that danced and weaved like living things, pursuing their targets with relentless determination. A Draxian capital ship took a direct hit from the unbroken Dawn's main guns. The vessel's shields flared, held for perhaps 2 seconds, then collapsed. The following impacts tore through the hull like it was made of paper. The ship broke apart, atmosphere and debris venting into space. The battle lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes of violence so intense that Vela could barely comprehend what she was watching. The humans fought with a precision and ferocity that defied belief. They moved as one entity, each ship anticipating the other's actions, covering weaknesses, exploiting openings in the Draxian formation. When it ended, 6 Draxian capital ships were destroyed. The other 2 were fleeing at maximum speed, trailing atmosphere and debris, their escort craft either destroyed or scattered. The human fleet remained in perfect formation, barely damaged. A few scorch marks, some depleted shields, but nothing significant. Vela stood at the window, her entire body trembling. She had just witnessed the most one-sided military engagement in Xanthari recorded history. The Draxians, who James had described as ruthless and powerful, had been utterly crushed. Her communicator chimed. Captain Okonkwo's voice came through. Commander Kelleris, Xanthari personnel, the threat has been neutralized. You may return to normal operations. The Fourth Fleet will maintain position to ensure no further Draxian incursions occur. Later, after the all-clear had been given, Vela found herself back in Bay 4. The human delegation had returned. And this time the conversation was very different. Commander Kelleris looked like he'd aged 10 years in the span of hours. You destroyed them, Kelleris said, his voice hollow. In minutes, you destroyed a force that outnumbered you.